Commissioner. So first item up is for public comment. So do we have anybody on here that wishes to give public comment? Okay, not seeing or hearing anyone. I will move on to the consent agenda, which is the minutes from the March committee meeting. I need a motion and a second from any committee member.
I'll second.
Marcus Kaufman, ODF.
I didn't get a motion.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did we get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Please identify yourself.
Josh Wampler.
Thank you. And
then our second was Marcus.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, because of the way systems can work here, I'm just going to ask for any nay votes. Do you have any nay votes to that motion? Hearing none, I will consider that motion approved. Okay, next up, Leah, take me back to my agenda, please. Thank you. Okay, so this is where our forestry workforce study and report starts to happen. So Melissa, Andrew, are you prepared?
Yes. Hi, thank you, Commissioner Pope, and hello to all the committee members. Thank you, Aaliyah, for putting those slides up. I know the date here on the title slide is wrong. We put these together quickly as this meeting has come together quickly, and we don't have very many slides, but certainly welcome this opportunity to connect with you all and give a brief update and just share where we are with things and to have a discussion about the materials that we've shared so far. So next slide. So our thought about what our slides cover here is just some study updates, stepping through where we are with the analysis, the engagement, the survey, looking at an outline of the report that we've just put here in the slides to run through quickly with you all, and then have a discussion with the discussion question put here, and then we have it on a slide also down below. But basically, based on what we've delivered so far, what perspectives, issues, and details seem to be missing that the forestry workforce study should address? Is anything misaligned with your experience? And can certainly touch on any other questions and topics that you all have in mind. So next slide. So just a reminder of the work plan for the study. We've moved through the first 4 tasks, and we're working on tasks 5 through 7. The workforce analysis is mostly done, summarized in the draft chapters that went out. Just a few little, lingering pieces that we're working on there. The program analysis, we're in the middle of, deep in the middle of, and then also follow-up engagement, which we're pretty close to being done with. We think we've done a lot of interviews and focus groups and can talk a little bit about those, but covered a lot of that in the last meeting. Next slide. And then, sorry, didn't say, recommendations and conclusions or what recommendations and next steps come last. So study updates. Maybe I'll pass it to Todd for a minute to talk about this first bullet item. The study timeline is going to be extended a little bit. Todd, did you want to talk about that?
Help.
Great.
Just a question that popped up. I didn't see Amanda on, Craig or Rex. Do you know if Amanda's going to try and join at some point?
She just texted me, said her computer decided to do an update this morning. So,
okay.
So
I just sent her an email because
she's trying.
She's an important person to have here, and I just wanted to make sure we didn't miss that. So thanks for that update, Craig. Yes. So because of the overall, I think, needs and thinking and maybe level of detail that is sort of revealing itself as this project goes along, particularly around the survey. But I think there may, in fact, be other things that will tend to slow things down. I made a recommendation to the co-chairs that we amend the report for time, and couldn't really figure out how to do that. It's a little tricky. I never had a situation like this pop up where we had a mandated due date legislatively as well as funding that had to be appropriated and sent out, in this case, to the contractor, which is Echo, by June 30th of 25 in this case. So I did some brainstorming with myself, I guess, and with a few others, and ended up talking to our legislative liaison here at the HEC, because as many of you know, it's long session right now. And it just so happened to be that it was like complete coinkydink random opportunity that HEC had, my words, I honestly don't remember the name of the bill, but it's essentially a cleanup bill for the agency that Kyle Thomas suggested we go ahead and amend the due date for the report to a later date. Kyle was actually able to talk with Amanda about it, and between my conversation with him and his with Amanda, we sort of landed on, just to be safe, to amend the final due date to the end of this calendar year. So we've got a lot of wiggle room. I've talked with Echo about all this, and we'll likely, of course, one would expect, finish up before the end of the year. But if for some unforeseen reason we need all of that 6 months, we've got it. So the second part to that that's a little tricky is...
Can I interrupt you, Todd? Can I interrupt you? So you just said, we've got it. This is still pending, as far as I know, with regard to legislative process. So,
yeah, good point, Craig. So
you.
yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for the distinction. It's an important nuance. It sounds like everything will work out according to Kyle, according to what we're hearing from the committee that will approve or not approve that HEC cleanup bill. But you're right. Ultimately, final has not been yet approved by that committee. So until then, you're right. It's not 1,100% assured. But again, the indications are that there's a very strong chance that it will be approved. And I suppose I can follow up with Kyle to see if there's any new news after the meeting, and see if he can give me a little bit more in terms of where it's at. Would that be good with you, Craig?
That would be good, and I'm thinking it's something that both Melissa and Andrew need to understand. I mean, it is tentative, and in the event that it isn't, we're still on the current timeline that was set out by the legislation. So just we're trying to get that done. And again, just completely for context for the group, Harris and I saw some collision points happening here, especially given that all of you likely have some thoughts on what this process has to look like. And we've witnessed that, and it's not, our interest is we don't want to try and cram this thing into a timeline that doesn't develop the results that the members really need to have. So that's why we're trying to get it done, but there is a process, and you all know what the legislature is like. And so betting on that at this point might not be safe. So we still have a timeline. We're trying to get it stretched.
Yeah,
and so just a question, is there a point at which it will be decided? Do we know when it might be for sure or not?
Again, every indication that I have gotten is that it should go through. So to get the latest and greatest, Melissa, I will follow up with Kyle Thomas as soon as this meeting over and try to get information from him, and then I can share it with everyone. But again, indications for me are that it will happen. The other piece I wanted to bring up, Craig, was that yes, as I've talked with you and Harris about, and also with Melissa and Andrew about, because of that second part that I talked about, which is that the money has to be spent by June 30th, we're going to proceed currently as though we still have to fulfill that obligation. In order to amend for time for the project, we'll have to do an amendment to the contract for time. We cannot amend for money. So what the plan is currently, and we've cleared this with HEC procurement, I think last week or the end of the week before, I guess, is to go ahead and try to get as much of the report finished as possible within the existing time frame, because we have to spend that money or we lose it. So by June 30th, we will take the form of the final report at HEC, and we will have to pay on that deliverable. But the amended contract will also require that we have another 6 months essentially to adjust that. I guess, again, Craig, this sort of new territory for me. So if I'm stumbling a little bit, that's why. So it will be essentially taking that final potential draft of the report and getting it completed within the next 6 months, if that makes sense. So that's sort of where we are. And again, I will follow up with Kyle Thomas, Craig, to find out where we're at.
Perfect, thank you.
It
So
looks
we
like
gotta-
Amanda had a question
Yeah,
or
go ahead.
comment.
Yeah, hey guys, sorry I was delayed getting on. My computer decided to do an update this morning, so that's always great. But did you mention the bill number? I have the bill number, if that's helpful.
It wasn't mentioned, so please.
No,
Yeah,
but
House,
yeah,
yeah, House Bill 3026 is the bill, the cleanup bill for HEC, and it did have a work session yesterday. It was voted out of committee with a due pass recommendation with the amendment that included a lot of different things, and in addition to ours, there's some real must-pass things in there for HEC from what I know. So it doesn't have a fiscal on it, so it's going to go get voted on the floor. There's no date yet for when that's going to be on the floor for the House, but then it'll go right over to the Senate side, the Senate Policy Committee for Higher Education. So it's a little bit of an easier pathway than getting mucked up in Ways and Means.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah.
Chris?
Yeah. So at this meeting that we're in right now, is the contractor on this meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, hi. Okay. So it doesn't, okay. So a couple of things. One, it doesn't seem like it should be that difficult, like has already been said, if it's part of the program, or excuse me, not the program change bill, if it's part of a cleanup bill, it shouldn't be that difficult to get done. But you're right, it's not done until it's done. I hear what you're saying about the authority to spend money expires June 30th. I do think we should explore whether there are avenues. I mean, I guarantee there are avenues for changing that, just maybe a little bit more complex. I don't really feel comfortable spending all the money within the due date being the end of the year. I think well, I don't know what the discussions are about the work that needs to be done, but there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. The draft of the first couple of chapters that I saw are they're just, I don't know how else to say it. I wasn't that impressed, and I'm not trying. I mean, it just needs a lot of work, and you're going to need time to do that work. And given the quality of the product to date, that makes me more uncomfortable paying for it, essentially paying for it, and then essentially just saying, okay, well, we'll get it by the end of the year, but we've already paid for it. Like I don't know. That doesn't feel like it's probably a good process. And I do think we should explore whether there's something that we could do for extending that authority, that time authority. And Heck might know more about that. I know a lot about legislative processes, but I do not know I do not know much about processes for getting money out the door that agencies work with.
Okay, Todd.
Yeah, thanks for that. I had the same concerns. I've never done that before. Sort of cash in advance strategy on a document like this. So when I loop back with Kyle on sort of additional insight potentially from him in addition to what Amanda just provided, I'll ask him. Well, first I'll tell him there's consternation on the part of some of the committee members in terms of that approach and what other potential options might there be. And then I can let Craig and Harris know, well, I can let all of you know what those options might be. Again, please understand I've not had a situation like this ever in my many years here. So that's why I'm a little unfamiliar with potential solutions. Thanks.
Jim?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so Todd, just to help you out a little, because I've had a lot of experience in a few different agencies over my career around procurement and contracts and expenditures and due dates. The general rule is under our procurement rules and statutes with Oregon is that payment has to occur before the end of the biennium, obviously, but the work has to be done before the payment is submitted. So and there may be exceptions, but they're pretty rare. I haven't come across them. Generally, the state of Oregon doesn't allow payment in advance for work that isn't done yet, especially over a end of a biennium. So just be sure to be aware of that there may be ways to do that. It may be involving sort of seeing if the agency has a flexibility to pull money from other places. But I just want to be sure you were kind of aware of that, because the options may be a little more limited if there isn't a fiscal on the bill.
Yeah, I mean, that's essentially what I said and asked of folks above me. So what I just shared was the response, but I'll circle back and share what you all have said and see what other options we might have potentially that we could pursue.
All right, John, I'm going to take yours as last question. We need to move on here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, this is the last question, but I heard two concerns. I heard a process concern and I heard a content concern. Is that accurate? Or am I mistaken? So if we can't address the process concern here, can we address or at least specify what the content concern is and maybe discuss that? I mean, if we don't know what we don't know about the process in terms of payments or whatever, we still have which is really the product, right? For us, the pay, we are stewards of that money, but what's the goal here? The goal is to get a good study done. And there are concerns from some of the members that perhaps we're not there yet.
Absolutely noted. And the product is what we're here to talk about today primarily, but just giving context to the work behind the scenes on the timeline extension, and all this is great input. And absolutely, we should be leaning into concerns about making certain, as we would in any business venture, that we're not paying for something that we didn't get. So I think that's always noted, and it's certainly something that the co-chairs here will work with the staff team on to make certain that that is the focus of what we're talking about. But we will need some help to make certain if we have to ask for a legislative process to get that done outside of procurement, then that's part of what we have to accomplish as well. So noted. And again, I'm concerned about timeline just for this meeting. So Melissa, back up for you. Thank you for your patience here.
No, of course. Good discussion. And yeah, I'll move through this quickly here. Just 2 slides on study updates. The survey is out in the field. Thank you everybody for helping with distribution of that. We have 66 responses so far, and this week are following up with reminders to complete the survey. Certainly are hoping to get more than those 66 through the door. We have about 30 interviews completed, about 5 focus groups completed, and those are, just freshly completed, and so we're still processing all the notes from those and working on the analysis of what we heard in all of those interviews and focus groups. The program analysis, just some bullets here on the data requests that we're waiting on and working with. We have IPEDS data, which is the post-secondary data that we're looking through for all of the forestry related programs. CTE analysis, we have the data that we need for that. The BOLI data request, we're still waiting for that request to be fulfilled. We're trying to get some word out of BOLI about when those apprenticeship data can be provided. And then we have most of the data from HEC that we need for the program analysis for program outcomes linked with employment data. So we have most of those data, just waiting for a final piece of wage data and a couple other things that are lingering. So we're close on that. Next slide. Okay, so this goes back to the workforce analysis. So one of the chapters that has been provided so far is the workforce analysis summary, and through hearing some feedback from Amanda and discussing internally what more we could do with that analysis. Here's a list of things that we're planning to do to improve that sector definition and the employment business counts. There's a few hundred employees that OED and OFRI counted manually that we can add. The main gap that we see in the counts of things so far is for transportation non-employers. So we are working on, we're working with a US DOT database to see what we can get from there. Requires some web scraping. We're, seeing if it's possible to do a data request. That seems unlikely. We've put in an inquiry to ODOT for a data request, haven't heard back from them yet. And then the final bullet point here is something we can do pretty easily and quickly is put together counts of employment and non-employer establishments for a whole bunch of industries that are important to the sector, but that OED, for example, doesn't include in its sector definition. We would not, however, be able to estimate shares that are part of the forestry sector of all of those additional industries. So that's our tentative plan based on feedback we've heard so far for working a bit more on the workforce analysis. Andrew, if there's anything you'd like to add or say in addition, and then you'll take over from here. So handing it off to you.
Yep, thank you. And we can come back to this if we need to, but for now we can move on to the next slide, which we just have a couple of slides here that fairly basic, but just give an outline of how we're seeing the report right now. Happy to take feedback on it. Really, it's just the compendium compilation analysis of all the tasks that were listed up above, but just sort of to step through this very quickly. We will prepare an executive summary. We will open the report with a description of the forestry sector, What are the industries and the components, et cetera? What are some basic, what's some basic information about the sector? Then move into the workforce analysis, which again, the committee has received a draft of that chapter, and we'll welcome any feedback on that in a minute, where we describe the workforce, the occupations, who's involved, and what are the skills and characteristics of that workforce. We've been, as you know, we've been doing a lot of engagement, both interviews, focus groups, and I would put the survey in this category. We'll describe, the key questions, the goals for the engagement, how we approached recruitment, who we talked to, and an analysis of what people told us and the implications thereof. Okay, next slide. And wrap it up. As Melissa noted, we're still waiting and collecting data for the program analysis. Do have some data and have analysis in progress, but we will follow a similar approach for that piece of analysis, describe the data that we've collected, what it contains, and what our analysis shows and suggests about the workforce. In terms of the analysis, the final component would be the gap analysis. If we pair what we know about the current workforce and what we think we know about the future of the workforce and the programs that are available today, what's missing? What does that mean for the state's efforts along these lines to support the industry? And then wrap it up with our recommendations and appendices as needed. Okay, again, we can come back to this as well, but the next slide just has brings us back to our discussion question. Based on what you've seen so far, what's missing, what do we need to address to get to that final product that everybody's anticipating, and I just wanted to open it up and have that discussion.
Super. So Leah, can you take that slide down, please, and put the full screen back? Thank you. All right, who wants to kick it off? Lots of thoughts, and so I've heard from Amanda extensively. Just heard from Chris. Let's start talking about what we need to focus on. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, maybe I'll kick it off. Craig, as you mentioned, I've spoken a little bit with you, and Harris, it looks like he just hopped on and touched base a little bit with Melissa and Andrew, although nothing super detailed at this point. So, there's a lot here. I think we'll get into different pieces, but I think where I'm gonna start is just on, as it relates to the draft chapters that were sent, is on the forest sector definition section, and kind of how different parts of the sector have been grouped together. As you can imagine, Associated Oregon Loggers is particularly interested in the forest contract sector, and the way that that's been defined in here is kind of grouped under forestry support with a lot of other sectors that make in many ways dilute, I think, the results of the study that we're concerned about in being able to make this study actionable for the sector, that part of the sector that we represent. And as we've spoken about, even within kind of our membership, there's uniqueness within even subsectors within kind of the forest contract sector. So different things are going to have to be done, and different solutions developed for different parts of the forest contract sector in and of itself. If you are including transportation in there, if you're including kind of fallers and heavy equipment operators, thinking about reforestation and firefighting, each one of those has sort of its own subset of workforce challenges and solutions. So we're concerned about how different occupations and sectors have been lumped together, even just at the forefront in the sector definitions. So, I'll leave it there. And if anybody else has maybe comments on that, they can comment on that, or if we want to take it a different direction, we can do that. But that's just one of our main concerns that would require sort of a rethinking you know, kind of a restructuring. You know, if we were to change that, there would be a significant restructuring of how the data is being presented and organized in the report.
Thanks, Amanda. Mindy?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I wonder, Amanda, to speak to that, if maybe Andrew and Melissa, so my understanding is that there's going to be a fundamental data limitation here when we're talking about numbers of people employed in the different sectors and subsectors. So I wonder if there's an opportunity we could talk about those different subsectors and things that you were alluding to, Amanda, about the different work requirements, the different pathways for getting there. But maybe if Eco could speak a little bit to how are we fundamental when we're talking about numbers of people in each sectors, what is our fundamental data limitation here?
Well, I mean, the data limitation, fundamental, there's a couple of data limitations. One, you think about, you know, a lot of employment is employment of employers. We can look at industry of employers. To some extent, OED has gotten into the detailed weeds that they have access to and identified specific employers within specific industries. As Melissa mentioned, there are some industries that we know are relevant, if not critical, to forestry. But as an external party, we don't have access to all of the detail to be able to identify who is part of the industry and who isn't. And so we're limited in terms of how we can characterize probably largely support services, but you know, parts of the economy that are associated with forestry that just aren't visible in the data. The other is the large number of non-employers, sort of your independent contractors and so on, about whom we have very little data from sort of standard sources. That's one of the reasons we're doing the survey. Part of the goals of the engagement is to get, you know, whatever information we can, at least in a qualitative sense, on those. But that is a sector of the industry that is difficult to quantify, and so we run into limitations there.
Courtney?
I guess I'm back kind of at Amanda's key points and some concerns in some of that framing, and sort of how fundamental it is. I also there seems to be a lot of focus on firefighting jobs and a seasonality, you know, kind of assumption of seasonality, which we really don't have a limited season in the industry here in Oregon. And so as I read through it and I find a lot of those buried themes kind of consistently throughout, I'm really wondering how much kind of restart has to occur to disconnect from those underlying assumptions of seasonality and kind of contradicting statements of out-of-state contracts versus data showing in-state, and then a real focus on some of the firefighting jobs. So I think maybe more of a concern, less of a question.
Thank you. So you would, yeah, and we obviously don't need all of the information now. I'm happy to take written comments after the fact. We don't want to get too far into specific weeds, but just to clarify there, are these, is this more of too much focus on particular themes versus things you just don't agree with, or are there specific concerns about, you know, inappropriate presentation of material? You know, this just isn't true for the sector, for example.
I mean, I think our perspective is that the assumptions aren't necessarily supported by what's actually occurring. And so just in kind of my quick review. And so part of it is to understand what data or what collection of information led to some of those conclusions. The seasonality, you know, there's some, and this is kind of moving in another direction, but there's also some discussions about, you know, the automation has driven workforce decline. And I would question whether other factors are driving workforce changes, sometimes motivating innovation towards automation. So that causal relationship, that was not kind of my understanding of how we've experienced it
So without understanding what data you were pulling from, it's hard to say that it's a data problem, but I do know there's kind of a lot of older studies, some inferences to current administration policy that I don't believe is impacting our workforce now. That would be future impacts we'd see. So I just wasn't finding real solid information underneath some of the discussion points. And it could just be that there's a lack of it, and that's why. But then those assumptions lead to more questions.
Thank you.
My co-chair, Harris.
Good morning, everyone. I'll save all the excuses. There's been a culmination of why I joined late today, and my apologies. And I don't know if this was covered already too, but I did want to touch base. I know one of the things too was some overgeneralization in some of the areas. I don't know if that was touched on, but I know I had in my notes from the meeting prior that we had discussed some of these things. I know loggers were lumped into, like, as an example, loggers were lumped into forestry support, which carpenters were also lumped into that area. And so I think that was some of the stuff that some of the experts in this field, when they see that kind of stuff, it kind of just leads them down to these other avenues where they're looking at maybe where some overgeneralization or some areas of inappropriate markers of different forestry kind of areas are lumped in together where they maybe shouldn't be. So that was some, I don't know if that was touched on, but I think that's maybe something else you guys can take a peek at.
Yeah, no, appreciate that feedback. And setting aside the data limitations, some of this reorganization, we can certainly, I mean, that's a relatively straightforward thing to do. And we'll, work with, one or all of you on how to do that appropriately.
And Andrew, is some of that relational to the codes that you use to identify subsectors?
In general, there are a lot of code issues. There's a lot of, I think, mismatch between, we have an industry with an occupation. The occupation in the field is called something different. Every job is unique to some extent. There are certainly issues there. I think what I've heard today, though, there are probably some things we can do to rearrange, sort of how we're presenting the information that better aligns with, everybody's experience on the committee.
And I think that that's important to note here. Again, that's what I've seen, not just in this study, but and I think all of us have seen this challenge with these codes. And so if you focus your study process on codes, you're going to create a collision point eventually for the folks that are interested in the results. So somehow, first, I think need to note in the report, these codes aren't necessarily a pathway to a good study. But additionally, what did we do to overcome the identifiers in these codes, and how do we reach the outer areas of the sectors that are important here? So I just want to make certain we get to that, because I think that is a main challenge that we have. And then, of course, the other thing that's going to be noted, I don't know that we're ever going to solve, is the fact that we have agencies that simply don't have the information we need. And I think that's another element in this report. I'm not trying to get to a conclusion in the report, but it needs to be added as a clear statement that we can't get to everything that we need because it doesn't exist. There isn't a good clearinghouse for all that. If I'm wrong, Amanda, Chris, I know you both have strong feelings about other report work that's been done and how it needs to be incorporated, how it needs to align with what we're doing right now. So I want to make certain that we jump into that. Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Craig. It's definitely true. And I think part of the purpose of this survey or this study, and the reason that we included in the RFP to be additive to what's already been done, is because we see those gaps and we see that challenge. And, we're really hoping for additional unique, innovative solutions to create new methodologies and trying to pull from new sources. So, Melissa, I appreciate you guys looking through and sort of digging into some of the like ODOT information and some of the transportation stuff, because I know that that's a place that's been challenging, as well as, trying to make some inferences about the independent contractor, sole proprietor type businesses. And, you know, if there's no way that we can get a specific number, because there would just be too much back of the napkin stuff, it's at least having some descriptor in there to recognize that this is a critical part of the workforce and that we need to develop solutions. Because at the end of the day, the goal really is to be actionable with this, like that it leads to action, as far as, you know, being able to get more workforce dollars into the state, being able to put more emphasis and effort by the state and industry working together through, you know, public-private partnerships to kind of address some of these challenges. So just want to highlight that, kind of putting a finer point on what Courtney had to say around some of the seasonality pieces. You know, there's probably a need here to separate out in some capacity around kind of the definition of the workforce, public versus private. And so there's a lot of public seasonal work that happens with the U.S. Forest Service and a little bit with Department of Forestry around firefighting, like Courtney said, but also just other seasonal recreation work and timber marking and things like that. So I think a little bit of separation and acknowledgement that of where some of that seasonality work lies. And then on the private side, where there is seasonality, for instance, with some private firefighting and tree planting, you know, having a recognition that a lot of those folks do other work. And there's a lot of DBA businesses where, you know, technically somebody might be working for one business in one part of the year, but then another business really owned and operated by the same family or individual for other parts of the year. And that's how people end up being able to work full time. And so there is that opportunity. And so it's it's just a like recharacterizing that narrative around seasonality. And I would actually argue that there's probably too much focus on that specific point. I think that it's a little bit of a red herring in the study. And I think it diverts attention away from other pieces that are more important. So just wanted to highlight that. And I think that there's a positive narrative there too, that we have a lot of opportunity for entry-level work in this sector that I don't think people often recognize, whether that is on the public side or on the private side with internships and things like that and apprenticeships. There are those opportunities, and those are really good things and things that we should be celebrating. And it seemed like some of the seasonality pieces and some of the theming on that piece was pretty negative. So I just wanted to highlight that.
That's helpful.
Harris.
Yeah, and just to tag on with what Amanda said, correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, but I know part of that too was that really phrasing it as though that seasonal work there's intentionality to that. And it's not just because the work's slow and people get laid off. It's like it's a forecasted, intentional part of that sector. That you know, you guys at ECO, that may not be something that, you know, when you're looking at these things, it might not read that way unless you really know about the sector personally. And with Amanda kind of knowing that hey, this is a really intentional seasonal thing. And then the other thing that Amanda mentioned just now, about kind of the entry level opportunities. I think that's neat to add that into a study like this, where you know, as she said, we want this to be an actionable, living study that can be utilized, and that sector needs to grow. There's a lot of valuable employment opportunities, and for that to be showcased in this would really be a benefit. So thank you for that feedback, Amanda, and thank you, ECO, for the openness and hearing us out in a good way.
Yeah, and I think just to highlight what Harris said, the intentionality, well, I think one is that it's, you know, obviously there's a season to firefighting, obviously there's a season to planting and things like that. And a lot of that work is done through H-2B visa workers that are required to be seasonal workers and temporary workers. They cannot be in this country for longer than that season of employment. So that's kind of, I think, the intentionality piece there, that we don't want it to come off as saying like, you know, like, oh, this is such a bad thing, but you know, there isn't that intentionality piece there. So just some of that additional narrative, but probably less graphs and less tables on that piece, and maybe a little bit more narrative describing that would be better, because people always draw themselves to graphs and tables and visual representations of data. So you know, I think a table is great, but probably less of a focus on the visuals there might lend itself to better explanation of what's going on.
Chris?
As I've been thinking about it, I think one of my concerns is that because it appears that some of the analysis thus far has been code driven, which, you know, if you're a consultant and you're not familiar with the industry, and we would not expect that you would be, you know, it makes sense to look at the codes. But you know, if there's a circle, draw a little circle. I don't know if you can see this. Nope, can't see it, so it doesn't work. Imagine two concentric circles. One, the actual sector, and then one is the NAICS codes. And there is some overlap, but if you just focus on the NAICS codes, you're going to miss a ton that's in the sector. And if you focus just on what you believe is in the sector, it's not going to line up with the NAICS codes. And so the data that's derived from that, or the conclusions that are derived, because the NAICS codes tell you to look at furniture manufacturing. And honestly, I don't remember how much was also driven by the language of the bill, but carpentry is irrelevant. Furniture manufacturing is irrelevant. I mean, you know, furniture manufacturing, yeah, no, I mean, it's really irrelevant for our sector's workforce. And there's one other that, and then I saw references to vocational rehab, you know, and things like that. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't understand really how that's you know, that's not really a significant part of the sector per se. So I've just been thinking through of how do you, if you don't have, how do you make sense of codes and codes that lead to data if the codes just can't line up with all the subsets of the workforce, you know, and there are many subsets of the workforce, because really when you talk about the forestry sector or the forest sector, it's sort of a web, and you're trying to make sense. The more I've thought about it, I mean, I don't envy your job. Like, and I know maybe I came out a little hot earlier because I look at it and I go, man, I was just shaking my head going, if I showed up to a mill and said, yeah, I'm hoping to get a job as a lube technician, everybody would look at me weird and go, what is that? You know, so that undermined my confidence in how you're learning about the sector. And I understand you've now had some focus groups, you've got the survey, so hopefully that'll round stuff out. But it seems like that has to be more the foundation. And then you've got to find data sources or figure out a way to study that foundational, what you develop from more foundational knowledge rather than the other way around. And I don't know. I'm anxiously awaiting to see how this turns out, because it feels backward to me, but and I just don't know how we're gonna how you're going to be able to produce something really actionable.
Yep. Well, yeah, all good points from everybody, really, but points well taken. And I will say, obviously, you don't envy my job. We're limited in scope and ability, and so I think what we try to do is, you know, at least the code data are available, is do what we can with that, and then take our conclusions from that into the field and to the committee, you and others here. and say, you know, what's wrong, what's missing. And I think we've heard about just specifically furniture manufacturing. That was related to language of the bill. I think we can talk about how to de-emphasize it or remove it completely from the report. But some of it's sort of rock in a hard place. But you know, we are trying to leverage the engagement. We're talking to people. You know, what are the problems you see on the ground, and try to use that to better interpret the data that are available, because, you know, we can't go out and count everybody. We can't talk to everybody. We're trying to do the best we can, you know, to leverage both types of information.
Okay, I have to step away. I have a Board of Commissioners meeting and a hearing to opt to chair. And so I'm going to hand this off to Harris, and he's got his hand up first. So thank you all.
Hey, take care, Craig. Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say to Chris's point real quick too. I think that's why, you know, like a meeting like this is so important, because then Andrew and Melissa can get some of the boots on the ground, you know, insight, versus just, you know, like I think Andrew's input on, you know, the furniture manufacturing being part of the bill. I think that's pretty insightful there, because it's like, you know, from somebody that doesn't have boots on the ground, they're going off these various pieces to the puzzle, and if one talks about furniture manufacturing, there's no way that they'll really have a good idea, or, you know, that a lube tech is something that, you know, these employers would go, what's that? And that kind of, I think, trickles up to just the blurriness that occurs when you're dealing with the bureaucracy and whatnot, when these bills are passed, and people kind of have knowledge of it and they kind of don't. But I think, Chris, hopefully there's some confidence in you know, meeting with you know, Andrew and Melissa in these kind of capacities, where they can just get that raw feedback. And I don't think you were coming out hot at all. I think it's like, as an expert in the field, you're just kind of, you can't hold it back. Hey, these are areas that just don't add up, and that we like to see. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's exactly what Andrew and Melissa need and want in order to move forward in a good way. So I want to say thanks for the input, Chris. And I think it's spot on. And I think this is a great platform to discuss that. Just a couple things I wanted to touch on. And again, pardon me if these were addressed prior to me popping on. But I know there was a mention of some of the outdated data that was referenced. And I know there was particularly some from 2017 and 2012 that I think Amanda might have touched on that may not be as relevant. And I'd like to get feedback from the committee there on whether that's something they should keep in there, or maybe even look at taking away. And then the last thing was a recommendation from Craig when we had met, and it was, or maybe it wasn't somebody else, but anyway, there was no comparison to how the Oregon forestry sector, or the workforce, compares to other states, or where there's maybe potential differences or similarities. And again, I'd love feedback from the committee on whether that would be relevant. I think it would be, but I'd like to hear maybe some different views on that one. And I don't think any of that was present in the study that we saw. We have multiple hands up, and I am working from my phone as one of the issues today. So go ahead, Rex.
Hello, I'm Rex Storm of the Associated Oregon Loggers, and I'm not on the committee, but you know, I will offer my perspective as a consumer of this report, of the ultimate product of this work group, and what I will share with you is the purpose of the study is to add additionality in terms of characterizing the workforce in the forest sector. So the workforce analysis is a critical aspect of what we're trying to accomplish here. And I will offer that as a consumer, the first preliminary initial couple chapter draft that has been provided, I will say that analysis of the workforce is flawed, and it's inaccurate to the degree that it's not useful, it's not helpful. As a matter of fact, the industry already has better information than what is being proposed here. And so that's not a good starting point. And so I will underscore the importance of the course correction that needs to occur here. And you'll humor me for a moment, but let me add, why do we come to that conclusion that this is unworkable and that the analysis is flawed. First of all, it just completely mischaracterizes the workforce in so many different ways, many of which you've already heard, but I'll add a couple more in that it's misleading and biased in terms of the conclusions about technology and seasonality, employers and non-employees versus non-employees, those folks that are owners. There is a incredibly large part of this sector that is not characterized sufficiently or even addressed here. Missing segments, if you rely only on the codes and you say, well, if we don't have the data, we can't talk about it. Well, I guess we shouldn't do the study then, if we're not going to go beyond what the U.S. Department of Labor statistics says is a logger. We know there are many other aspects that are uncharacterized in terms of construction, transportation, ag services, labor services. The other part is locational, seasonality, the scope of the change over the last 10 to 20 years, 10 to 30 years is inaccurately described, in that the industry has compressed because of public timber management compression, in that the scope of that compression is not characterized such that the responsiveness of the workforce, false assumptions are made. 350 employees added, or people added, for other sectors, that's not enough, and it's not very gratifying. And so I'll just say that we really are looking for a course correction. Otherwise, why are the taxpayers paying for this study? That's a valid question here. We need to have the Oregon be responsible stewards of Oregon taxpayer dollars and not produce a study that is unhelpful and inaccurate in terms of characterizing the workforce. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Andrew. No, go
ahead.
I
was just going to say, as Harris mentioned just before, that we welcome this feedback and do want to work with you and the committee to make those corrections. And I think more conversation to come offline on some of those points. But yeah.
Thank you for that, Rex. I sure appreciate that openness and that willingness to basically speak that way to these folks. And like I said, is raw and unfiltered is sometimes that may sound to folks. I think Andrew and Melissa value that, because there's no way to get the accuracy of the study without that input. So let me head over to John.
Thank you. I work for Southwestern Oregon Workforce Investment Board to run their manufacturing sector partnership. And you guys would understand, if I'm in Douglas County, Oregon, where most of my emphasis is. I won't go any further. I guess at this point, if you throw a broad blanket over issues with the industry, I think we could probably all lay odds that it's going to be similar to every other manufacturing or every other industry. We've got a shortage of people with skills and so on and so forth. The concern about the accuracy, and I don't know if that's the right word, but the maybe relevance of the information that's being gathered, I really can't say, because it's not all in, but I would be curious as to what offerings we have. How might we, if we're going to course correct, if there is some type, what might we do differently? Do we need more people? Do we need more respondents in certain sectors? So my thought is more around, if indeed there's some general agreement that we don't have what we want, what kind of suggestions would we have so we can get that process going forward, and then enlisting our resources that we have here in our network to go out and shake the tree a little bit and see what we need. And I have not weighed in on that, just kind of watching process here, but I think that might be a very productive direction for a sense, you know, for some solutions as opposed, I mean, if that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Yeah, I'll say that's definitely how I want to round the meeting off for sure. I mean, for the sake of all productivity and moving forward, very good input that we've all provided thus far. But I think it's going to be vital that before we hop off this meeting, that we're all able to provide some deeper input to Andrew and Melissa in terms of moving forward and how we can course correct if that's the route it sounds like we're wanting to go. Who else did I? And then I think Chris was the last one that I wanted to call on that had their hand raised. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I had other things to say earlier, but at this point, one of the things that has been going through my head, and I don't know how much of this is driven by the bill language because well, I wasn't really a part of drafting the bill, but it seems like there's a fairly significant division in the sector between what happens in the woods and what happens once logs are unloaded in a sawmill log yard. And so there's the manufacturing, and yet there is some overlap. And yes, there are definitely, you know, over one's career, there are people that they used to be a shovel operator in the woods and now they're a shovel operator in a log yard. I mean, yes, there is some overlap, but generally speaking, they're kind of different parts of the sector. And I think, you know, both have different types of workforce challenges, but as you know, Rex and Amanda have been working on for years, you know, the forest operator workforce is really like that needs to be a major focus of, and it has been a focus for Associated Oregon loggers. And I'm not saying that there aren't manufacturing workforce issues, but to what extent does the bill language allow just a narrower focus? And if it doesn't allow a narrower focus, then I don't know, maybe there's a creative way to say, look, you know, this is a completely different study. If you're looking at manufacturing, Exhibit A is the language in the bill that requires looking at furniture manufacturing. And that would be a completely, because, you know, if you're talking about manufacturing and everything that is derivative from a wood product, then you're really looking at not just primary manufacturing, primary wood products manufacturing, but you're looking at the secondary wood products. And then maybe you pull in furniture manufacturing and cabinet making and things like that. You probably still don't pull in home building because that's just a very, very different thing altogether. But it seems like if you're looking for a clean way, and I haven't talked with Rex and Amanda about this, so I'm not trying to, you know, if you guys disagree, just say you disagree. But there might be a clean way to focus just on what's happening in the woods with that workforce, and then punt and say it would require further study to really accurately portray manufacturing, and you include paper manufacturing in that. That's a different thing. It's a very different thing. And some of the challenges are created by trying to squeeze these in together and characterize it all in one study. So that's just one thought. And yes, perhaps there's a way to accomplish that even within the bill language.
Thanks, Chris. Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, and I know, Julie, you've had your hand kind of up and down. Do you have a relevant comment that you want to say now, or do you want me to? Because I have kind of something to go off of what Chris was saying, but I want to recognize that it's been up and down.
Yeah, sorry, I'm on the road, so I wasn't sure. I think I've been in and out of connection. So sorry if can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was just overall a couple of things. One was, I understand we're trying to categorize what the sector looks like now, which we've all done in different ways and asking it to be presented differently. I think a part of it is the overall tone that I think we have an opportunity for this workforce study for forestry in Oregon that we haven't had previously, rather than saying essentially that technology has reduced jobs. We're looking at a new and innovative sector that has brought in technology to make things safer, to make things more accessible for more people to work in this sector. And I think there's somewhat of a tone of that needs to be thought about, is how to help portray that in a way that this sector is innovative. I think to Chris's point about looking at what is it on the wood side and what's on the manufacturing side, OFRI studies have looked at that as kind of the circles, and then we worked circles out from there, those that are second or third tier. But I also think one of the other things of other workforces that we haven't even really seen much addressed to this, is, and maybe the studies can do this, but are things like what how many job announcements are out there that are going unfilled? What are those needs of the industry now, and how has that changed over time? I think there's a lot that can be gleaned from, what is it that's being needed versus also just trying to categorize how do we categorize this group? What is it the industry is looking for? And I haven't really got that pulse of this from that as well. If I look at the California workforce study, that was a big part of what they did was look at what is it that is open and employers need, and what are those skills they're looking for, and then where are they getting those skills, who's producing those skills, and then you can see a whole, and that allows us as an industry to say these are the things we need. So I think focusing on what is the sector and where is it now is important, but I also don't want to miss there's some other things that I think a workforce study could really help give a picture of for the sector, and for us asking more of this help for this industry, for trainings, other workforce. And I'm not sure, given the study we've seen so far, we'd be able to ask for those.
Thank you, Julie. Amanda, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate that framing, Julie. And to kind of get at some of what Chris was saying as well, I think as you can imagine, we worked on this bill the session before it got passed as well. So there's been many, many, many iterations of kind of what we were hoping for, and between until what we got. And I think our initial concept for the study had a specific call out to forest contracting, and a need there, given that that's been a pretty significant gap because of data challenges in past studies. But so having a bit of a focus there as it relates to there kind of being a gap there in previous work, but also recognizing that the sector is really large and diverse, and that it's integrated, and that we all need each other in order for it to work, right? And so I think one of the challenges that I see with some of the sector definitions and what may be being left out is that, like, if we are not including all of it, then we're not meeting that charge. And so if we can't include all of it, kind of what Chris is saying, where can we maybe focus, or what kind of inferences can be made about the whole, even just identifying what really is the sector, and then kind of going from there and saying, well, but this is where we're going to focus. And so, we worked together on the survey. Melissa, Andrea, I really, really appreciate your guys's ability to collaborate on that. And I think you're able to see maybe the way that the sector defines the different pieces within it a little bit better within that. And I know you guys didn't want to include all the different pieces that I wanted included, and I appreciate, finding a unique solution there. But I think the survey really outlines, I think, the broad nature of the sector at large on the private side. It doesn't even go in, the survey doesn't even go into the public side and sort of the nonprofit, trade association, all these other technical service providers, thinking about like the Nature Conservancy and other conservation nonprofits that kind of work in the grant space for small woodland owner kind of coordination and things like that. So, we don't even get into all that, but like there's so many pieces of the sector, even thinking about fiber and the fiber side of the market, energy production. We've got a lot of manufacturing that isn't necessarily in Oregon, but also relies on wood coming from Oregon. So it's complicated, right? And I think that's what makes part of this sector and a study like this really challenging, is because it is complicated. And so, what I would like to see with this study is an acknowledgement of that, and an acknowledgement of how so many things are connected. Even so much as, I'm on the Manufacturing Industry Consortia for HEC, and I was talking to somebody after our meeting last week who was recognizing that, I think it was one of the Business Oregon guys for, economic development guys, who was like, yeah, there's this machinist company in my area and all they do is create like the metalworking required parts for cable yarding systems. So they're like putting together the cables, they're developing and hammering out the just the different shackles and things like that are required for that operation. But I can guarantee you that NAICS code would not be something included in this study, because it would be some sort of a heavy welding mechanic stuff that otherwise would not look like it's at all engaged or reliant upon the forest sector to stay in business. And so I don't know exactly where we go from here, because there are big pieces of I think that we would consider the sector that are left out, and some of that might be the self-limiting nature of how things got squeezed into kind of the definition of forest sector in the bill. But my hope would be that there is some of that connective tissue, even in narrative form, where we may not have the data, but the recognition that this is, there's a lot of this connective tissue. And that I think what we see and what I get really frustrated in is that the state as a whole doesn't recognize how important and how many kind of spokes there are from the primary product kind of in the woods work and primary manufacturing, how much secondary, tertiary, and support businesses that wrap around the sector at large, where if we lose a mill, if we lose supply of wood in the wood basket in Oregon, that has a huge ripple effect that I think is hard to quantify, but is critical to have some understanding of in the state. And so that just to kind of give some background of what I'm hoping to see, and maybe there's a flavor there that we can add into the report.
Thank you, Amanda. And I think, that's part of the big challenge if you think about some of the input that both Amanda and then Chris have added, and Rex and other folks, in terms of, the overgeneralization, mischaracterization, some of the stuff that's irrelevant. But then you have, some relevant information that smells similar, in terms of like, Amanda talked about shackles being produced, and it's like, so that's where I think this input that we provide to ECO is so important, because there's stuff in there like furniture manufacturing that we all say that's just completely irrelevant. And so I saw somebody spoke up about a lube tech or something, and wanted to provide some clarification on everybody they know knows what a lube tech is or something like that. But anyway, so there's a furniture manufacturing piece that is completely irrelevant, but then there's the other spokes to the wheel like Amanda had mentioned, that are relevant, but they aren't directly tied into somebody being a choker setter or running a mill planer or whatever, something like that. So that's where, much like somebody had said, I don't envy Eco Northwest on this study, but that's why, they're at the table, and that's why we selected them to get accurate and a good portrayal of what the forestry workforce sector looks like in the state. And so as we're wrapping things up, I'm going to throw some stuff out. Oh, Todd, did you have something to add? Okay. I wanted to just throw a couple kind of big generalizations out and make sure that Eco Northwest understands that that's kind of where this committee is feeling there is a lack in. And I think to wrap it up as kind of a final input from the committee on maybe where I'm missing the mark, or where other things that we'd like to make them aware of. And this can be bigger scope stuff. I mean, we provided a lot of detailed information to them, but I think overall, an overgeneralization of just the forestry sector in and of itself is one of the issues that I just think it's too general, and where it's not and where it is specific, it's lackluster or not relevant. Along with the overgeneralization, there's obviously a mischaracterization of some of that stuff, where some sectors are lumped into others and they shouldn't be. Some are just present and they shouldn't be. Some are being portrayed in a way such as like with the seasonal work and whatnot that in fact may not be correct just altogether. I had on here include more of what the sector really is, and that's such a vague subjective kind of statement, but it's like, I know that's, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's what a lot of the committee is feeling kind of hurt about, is like it's not really accurately portraying what the sector actually is. And so I think that's, and to know that is communicating with the committee or the chairs or Todd, or just increasing that communication, but also kind of doing homework, I think boots on the ground kind of homework on the forestry sector itself. Outdated references, we had talked about that. Employment opportunities. And then I think the other two I had on here was other Pacific Northwest states and their studies. I know somebody had referenced something about I think it was Julie, about a study in California, and there was some stuff in there that they really liked. So I don't think the committee is opposed to offering that to you guys in terms of maybe where to look for some other productive stuff. And I'm sure there's a lot of unproductive studies done in other states as well, so we don't want to go down that rabbit hole. And then just acknowledgement of the relevant overlapping sectors, and I think that was really encapsulated by Amanda's comment in terms of the spokes that are in the wheel of the forestry sector. And I think we want to make sure those spokes are portrayed accurately and are characterized correctly and whatnot in order to make this study the most productive it could be. Anything else? I'm sure there's got to be. Todd, go ahead.
Thanks for that summary, Harris. It was great. And I'm thinking back to what John Whiteley said earlier in terms of solutions and how to move forward. This all sounds really good, and thank you as a staff. I really appreciate you all coming together and having this important conversation today. I wonder if it makes sense to get some of this down on paper or electronic. I've sort of envisioned, I mean, this is just an idea. You can take it or leave it, but I sort of envisioned a list to get in even more clarity. There was a lot of notes that I tried to capture on my phone. I saw Melissa and Andrew taking copious notes. At the same time, there are things, I'm sure, because to your point, Amanda, this is complicated. And to really get a better understanding of what you all, as experts from your particular space in this sector bring to the table, I think it might be helpful to consider starting a list and circulating the list in terms of expectations. Some of this may be a lot of what you just said, Harris. But if we can get it, particularly in a form where it's down a couple layers of detail, so that when you see the next couple of iterations, you see yourself and your thinking in the report, I think that would potentially be pretty helpful. Just a thought.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think I took a couple pages of notes, and I think a lot of other people were taking notes, and some of those might be focused on different areas that need to be looked at that aren't captured just in the notes that Eco took. So I agree. I think we'll definitely get something out circulating to the committee with Eco looped in on that. That's kind of a living document that has kind of our input that we provided at this meeting. Go ahead, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add one more comment. In some of how AOL's been, some of the comments that we've made and Rex made around employment. And one of the things that we've been trying to do is really shift the conversation away from employment and really utilizing that word workforce, being more inclusive of rather than just employment and employers, but shifting it to workforce and then capacity. And I can't remember if Courtney or who it was that mentioned around automation, or maybe Julie, around automation and what is really shifting, what kind of the chicken or the egg, right? Like, are we innovating to be able to meet the demands of the sector? And that's why we're automating or bringing in new technology. Reality is we are moving into a space where we are a high demand, high wage, high technical type job, type work. And we want to be competitive for workers that are looking for work that are defined in those ways. Thinking about all the buzzwords in sort of the workforce space. And so, anyway, and I think that this was captured in the final bill language, but around capacity, right? Like in the gap analysis that you guys do for that, additional chapter, as you move into that piece, thinking about, not just what is my hope would be, it's not just what the or it isn't really what the employment needs are in the sector, but what is our current capacity to meet the forestry needs and the wood product demands. But do we have enough capacity? So thinking about kind of back to the seasonality that we talked about in the beginning, that any one company may actually be able to do work throughout the year utilizing different equipment for the same people. So there's efficiencies built into much of what we do as well. And so focusing on that capacity piece and sort of workforce as a whole rather than continuing on the path of just employment. So I just wanted to get that in there because I think that's a critical piece for us.
Thank you, Amanda. So yeah, I think, and to John's point too, as Todd discussed, I think that's the most vital takeaway from all this is what do we do moving forward to help correct some of these issues? It's really easy to bring the issues up. It's a lot harder to look for the solutions. So I think moving forward, what I'll do is I'll draft a document and get that out by the end of the week on some of the stuff that I captured in my notes and some of the stuff that I talked about as takeaways and whatnot. And I'll circulate that. And I think, Todd, do you have any kind of input on maybe, because I'm trying to think, if I drafted that and circulated it, it might be hard for ECO to keep track of. So like, let's say I put that out and Chris or Amanda or Rex or Courtney or somebody starts adding to that. Are we putting that in ECO's wheelhouse to then just track all those additions to the list? I'm not opposed to that either, but I just want to kind of get down to the logistics as we're rounding stuff off here on the next steps and getting all this good info that we discussed to ECO. No, I think you're on mute, Todd.
Yes, I am. Thanks. As I listened to people talk and was thinking about it, I wondered what Andrew and Melissa thought. Would it make sense for you all to take the first crack at it and then forward it out to everybody for input, feedback, or what you just said, Harris? I know that Melissa and Andrew are more deeply involved in the details here, so that's why I thought it might be reasonable to think about them sort of starting with the list, the bullets of what they've captured, and then send it out to everybody for feedback and input. Maybe we go 1 or 2 rounds, and on that second one, after it's done, say, okay, that's sort of it. Everybody's had their opportunity to weigh in. And then, depending on what that looks like and what ECHO is thinking and the committee is thinking, we can determine what next steps are. Maybe we can wait till our, next scheduled meeting, which I think is the 24th, or close to that. Is that right, Aaliyah? Yeah, on the 24th, or maybe, it will necessitate another one of these conversations to get to the point where we have the clarity that's necessary in order to move forward, so that we ensure that we have a quality, value add, and meaningful report for everyone here, and then for folks across the state.
Yep. Well, and I could see, I'd say either Harris would be helpful if you wanted to prepare something sent to us, or yes, we could take what we heard here and distribute that as the first pass. I think were we to do that, and I think this is okay, but that would include some sort of blanks or placeholders. We heard this theme, and it would be helpful to hear from the committee more detail on what what you said. But if that sounds appropriate, we can put that together and try to get that out quickly.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Todd. That feedback is exactly what I was looking for. I think that would make more sense, Andrew, if you can shoot something out that kind of encapsulates what you had heard today, versus me sending out just what I heard, because I'm not the one doing the study. So I think it'll be great if you can do that. And then, like Todd said, we can take a couple rounds at it. I think once that gets circulated, I'm fairly confident that I'm going to see what I kind of had brought up in your notes. And so I want the committee to be able to weigh in and make sure that they see what they had brought up in those notes as well. So if you can do that, Andrew, that'd be very helpful. And then Todd, on our meeting on the 24th, I think that's also a very good opportunity for the committee to gather. And then ECHO won't be at that meeting, correct? Or will they be, Todd? On the 24th.
I don't know that.
I don't
looking
think they will
Andrew
be.
and Melissa to sort of weigh in on that. I guess since we already have it on the calendar, it might be an opportunity to just save some time there in the event that they would want to come back, or the committee would want them to come back. And then I guess I would just also say, hey, is there anybody that doesn't like this plan that is here today or has input on next step being that Melissa take a shot and send it out to folks? Because if everybody's okay with that, we'll just go ahead and move forward, but want to give one last opportunity for people to weigh in if they're not okay with that strategy.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I want to be respectful of everybody's time too. We're at 9:32. And so, yeah, if there's any opposition to that plan moving forward, let it be known now. So moving forward, what we'll do is we'll kind of look for something from Andrew and Melissa to get to us on just some general notes on what they plan on sniffing out further. And then if anybody from the committee between now and our meeting on the 24th, feel free to add. Actually be very helpful to add your input to ECHO Northwest between now and when we meet again. So okay, I want to make sure I didn't cut out. My phone was just ringing. But anyway, so we'll look for that email from Andrew and Melissa to the committee. We'll provide some input back to them, and then we'll all meet on the 24th. And I think that is a great opportunity. If ECO can carve out a little bit of time to pop in on that meeting, I think that'd be highly beneficial. So Todd, if they're not on the invite for some reason, can you loop them in on the invite? And then Andrew and Melissa, if there's any particular issue with the time that we have, like say that you can only be at a half hour or 20 minutes worth of that meeting, please let us know, so that way we can have that kind of appropriately reflected in the agenda. So,
and then Harris, just one real quick thing before you let everybody go.
Go ahead.
I did email Kyle Thomas right after I said I would follow up with him after the meeting. I haven't heard back from him, but I'll do my due diligence to get that information and then fire that off to everyone as well. So thank you everybody for being here today. Really appreciate your time and efforts.
Yeah, likewise, as I send everybody off, I do want to thank first each and every member of the committee that's here, along with individuals that aren't part of the committee that are here, and provided very important information and very important input, because I think that's what's going to build this study to the level that we want it to be at. You know, Andrew and Melissa aren't the experts in this. They're just tasked with listening to the experts and then doing their own due diligence and digging through to find the various, you know, pieces to the puzzle that fit best and that accurately reflect what we want to see. So I appreciate everybody's input, most definitely. And I'd like everybody that was on this meeting to attend on the 24th, if at all possible, because I think it's a very important meeting to be at, especially with Andrew and Melissa present, and what will take place between now and then in terms of feedback. So with that said, any last closing comments or questions or input?
Question
Okay.
for Andrew. When does that
Go ahead.
survey close?
Well, I mean, we don't have to close it. We're sending but we should obviously at some point. We're sending out reminders this week to encourage more people, and 1 to 2 weeks from now. But it can't, depending on the distribution list and the people who allowed us access to that, contingent on having that extension. If it seems important, given the responses we've gotten, we can leave it open longer, send additional reminders. But for the most part, you get most of your responses up front and then some trickle in over a period of time. So.
Good question, Rex. Thank you. Thanks, Andrew. Okay, folks, we'll see you on the 24th, and then be expecting something between now and then from Andrew and Melissa that we can all kind of go through with a fine-tooth comb and make sure we see our input and comments in on there. And Melissa and Andrew, I sure appreciate you taking the time and just being really open to hear us out. And you're dealing with a lot of experts in the field, and so a lot of the input you get is just unfiltered, and that's exactly what I wanted to hear, and hopefully that was beneficial to you guys too. So thank you for taking the time. I sure appreciate you guys.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate all the input.
Thanks,
okay,
everybody.
hey, take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.